Before the gold and the glory, before the throne and the temple, there was a question, whispered into the soul of a young king in the stillness of a dream. What do you truly desire? This question would not only shape the destiny of a man, but would carve into the heart of a nation the greatest paradox of wisdom, that knowing the right path does not always mean walking it. The tale of Solomon begins not with his rise, but with the seeds of both his brilliance and his downfall planted on the same night. And so we ask, what would you choose if offered everything? The story of Solomon, son of David, begins with a divine encounter that would shape the destiny of an entire nation. When God appeared to the young king in a dream, offering him anything his heart desired, Solomon's request was not for wealth, power, or longevity, but for wisdom, the discernment to govern Israel justly. This humble plea resonated with the divine, and God granted him not only unparalleled wisdom, but also riches and honor beyond measure. From that moment, Solomon's reign was marked by a profound sense of purpose, as he sought to embody the ideals of justice, compassion, and divine guidance. His wisdom became legendary, drawing visitors from distant lands who sought his counsel, and his name echoed through the annals of history as a ruler blessed by the divine. Solomon's wisdom was not merely an abstract gift. It manifested in tangible ways that transformed Israel into a beacon of prosperity and peace. Under his rule, the kingdom flourished, its borders secure and its people thriving. His judgments, such as the famous case of the two women claiming the same child, demonstrated a keen understanding of human nature and a commitment to truth. The Queen of Sheba, hearing of his fame, journeyed to test him with hard questions, only to leave in awe of his insight and the splendor of his court. Solomon's wisdom was not confined to the courtroom or the palace. It permeated every aspect of his reign, from the construction of the magnificent temple in Jerusalem to the establishment of trade networks that brought wealth and prestige to Israel. Yet, Solomon's story is not without its shadows. Despite his divine gifts, he was not immune to the temptations of power and excess. His many wives, drawn from foreign nations, eventually led him astray as they turned his heart toward their gods. The very wisdom that had once guided him now seemed insufficient to prevent his downfall. The latter years of his reign were marked by a gradual erosion of the ideals he had once championed, as the kingdom began to fracture under the weight of his compromises. This tragic turn raises a haunting question: can even the wisest of men resist the corrupting influence of power, or is it an inevitable fate for those who wield it? The legacy of Solomon is a tapestry of brilliance and frailty, a reminder that even the most exalted figures are bound by human limitations. His reign stands as a testament to the heights that can be achieved when wisdom and divine favor align, but also as a cautionary tale about the perils of straying from one's principles. The temple he built, a symbol of God's presence among his people, would later fall into ruin, mirroring the decline of Solomon's own spiritual fidelity. Yet, his contributions to literature, such as the Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, endure as timeless reflections on the human condition, offering guidance to generations long after his passing. What, then, is the true measure of Solomon's greatness? Is it the splendor of his kingdom, the depth of his wisdom, or the lessons gleaned from his failures? Perhaps it is all of these, woven together into a narrative that transcends time. His story invites us to ponder the delicate balance between divine calling and human frailty, between the pursuit of wisdom and the allure of worldly desires. As the echoes of his reign fade into history, one question lingers: if Solomon, with all his wisdom, could falter, what hope is there for the rest of us? And yet, in his rise and fall, we find a glimmer of hope, a reminder that even in our imperfections, we are part of a larger, divine story. The tale of Solomon's wisdom is one that has echoed through the ages, a story so profound it transcends time and culture. It begins with two women, both claiming to be the mother of the same child, their voices trembling with desperation and fury. The court was silent, the air thick with tension, as Solomon listened intently to their pleas. His reputation as a wise king was already known, but this moment would etch his name into history. The women's stories were identical in every detail, save for the truth hidden beneath their words. Solomon's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, studied their faces, searching for the flicker of honesty in a sea of deceit. The crowd leaned in, breathless, as he prepared to deliver his judgment. What could he possibly say to unravel this tangled web of lies? Then, with a calm that belied the storm of emotions in the room, Solomon uttered the words that would become legendary. "Bring me a sword." The command sent a ripple of shock through the assembly. Murmurs of confusion spread like wildfire. Why? Would a king demand a weapon in a case of disputed motherhood? The women's faces paled, their eyes widening in horror. The sword was brought forth, its blade glinting ominously in the dim light. Solomon's voice, steady and deliberate, cut through the silence. "Divide the living child in two, and give half to one and half to the other." The room erupted in gasps. Was this the wisdom they had revered? Or was there something deeper, something more cunning, at play? The first woman's reaction was immediate and visceral. Her hands flew to her mouth, her body trembling as she cried out, "No, my lord, give her the child, but do not kill him." Her love for the child was raw and undeniable, her sacrifice a testament to her true motherhood. The second woman, however, remained cold and unmoved. "Let him be neither mine nor yours," she sneered. "Divide him." The contrast between the two could not have been starker. Solomon's gaze shifted between them, his mind piecing together the puzzle. The truth was now laid bare, not in words, but in the unguarded reactions of their hearts. The crowd watched, spellbound, as the king's plan unfolded. With a wave of his hand, Solomon silenced the room. "Give the living child to the first woman," he declared, "for she is his mother." The judgment was met with a collective exhale, the tension dissolving into awe. The first woman collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she clutched the child to her chest. The second woman slunk away, her deceit exposed for all to see. Solomon's wisdom was not in the threat of violence, but in the revelation of truth through the raw, unfiltered emotions of love and selfishness. The people marveled at his insight, whispering among themselves about the divine gift their king possessed. But the story does not end there. It lingers in the minds of those who hear it, leaving behind questions that stir the soul. How did Solomon know the true mother's heart? Was it divine inspiration, or the keen observation of a man who understood human nature better than most? And what of the child, growing up under the shadow of this legendary judgment? Did he ever learn of the day his life hung in the balance, saved by the wisdom of a king? The tale of Solomon's judgment is more than a display of discernment. It is a mirror held up to humanity, reflecting the depths of love, the perils of deceit, and the timeless quest for truth. The Temple of Glory, Solomon's crowning achievement, stood as a testament to divine favor and human ingenuity. Nestled atop the sacred hills of Jerusalem, its golden spires pierced the heavens, a beacon of faith for generations to come. The construction of this hallowed edifice fulfilled the long-held dream of King David, Solomon's father, who had yearned to build a dwelling place for the Almighty. Yet, it was Solomon who, with wisdom bestowed by God, brought this vision to life. The temple's walls, adorned with intricate carvings and overlaid with pure gold, whispered tales of devotion and sacrifice. Every stone, every beam, was laid with precision, as if the very hands of angels guided the craftsman. The air within the temple thrummed with an otherworldly energy, a palpable reminder that this was no ordinary structure. It was the dwelling place of the divine. The grandeur of the Temple of Glory was unmatched in its time, a marvel that drew pilgrims and kings alike to its gates. Its inner sanctum, the Holy of Holies, housed the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred vessel that held the tablets of the Ten Commandments. This chamber was shrouded in mystery, accessible only to the high priest once a year, on the Day of Atonement. The weight of God's presence was said to be so overwhelming that even the bravest of men trembled at its threshold. The temple's courtyards bustled with activity, priests offering sacrifices, Levites chanting psalms, and worshippers pouring out their hearts in prayer. It was a symphony of devotion, a harmony of humanity and divinity intertwined. Yet, the Temple of Glory was more than just a physical structure. It was a symbol of covenant and promise. Solomon's dedication of the temple marked a pivotal moment in Israel's history, a time when heaven and earth seemed to touch. As the king knelt in prayer, his voice echoed through the halls, beseeching God to hear the pleas of his people. The response was immediate. Fire descended from the sky, consuming the offerings, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. The people fell to their faces in awe, their hearts stirred by the undeniable presence of the Almighty. This moment sealed the temple's legacy as a sacred bridge between the mortal and the divine. But with great glory came great responsibility. The Temple of Glory demanded purity, reverence, and unwavering faith. Its rituals and sacrifices were not mere formalities, but acts of profound spiritual significance. The priests, clad in garments of white and gold, moved with solemn grace, their every action a reflection of divine order. The temple's existence was a constant reminder of Israel's covenant with God, a covenant that required obedience and loyalty. Yet, as history would reveal, the people's faithfulness wavered, and the temple's fate became intertwined with their spiritual journey. Would the glory of the temple endure, or would it fade like the morning mist? The Temple of Glory, though long vanished from the earth, lives on in the annals of history and faith. Its story is one of triumph and tragedy, of divine presence and human frailty. The echoes of Solomon's prayer still resonate, a timeless plea for mercy and guidance. The temple's destruction, centuries later, marked the end of an era but not the end of its legacy. For in its ruins lay the seeds of hope, a promise of restoration and renewal. What lessons does the Temple of Glory hold for us today? Can we, like Solomon, build something that transcends time and touches eternity? The answers lie not in the stones of the past, but in the hearts of those who seek the divine. Under the reign of King Solomon, Israel emerged as a beacon of wealth and power, its influence radiating across the ancient world like the golden glow of its fabled throne. The kingdom's prosperity was unmatched, a testament to Solomon's shrewd governance and the divine wisdom he was said to possess. Trade routes stretched like veins of gold, connecting Israel to distant lands, where merchants whispered tales of its opulence. The very air seemed to shimmer with the promise of riches, drawing travelers, diplomats, and traders to its gates. Solomon's throne, adorned with ivory and overlaid with gold, became the stuff of legend, a symbol of a kingdom that had transcended mere survival to achieve something far greater: dominance. The wealth of Israel under Solomon was not merely material. It was cultural, intellectual, and spiritual. The king's court became a melting pot of ideas, where scholars and sages from across the globe gathered to debate and learn. The Temple of Jerusalem, a marvel of architecture and devotion, stood as a testament to the kingdom's spiritual grandeur. Its walls, lined with cedar and gold, echoed with the prayers of the faithful and the awe of visitors. Yet beneath this glittering surface, whispers of intrigue and ambition swirled. Could such prosperity last, or was it destined to crumble under the weight of its own splendor? Solomon's reign was a paradox, a time of unparalleled peace and yet simmering tension. The king's alliances, sealed by marriages to foreign princesses, brought wealth but also introduced competing loyalties and foreign gods into the heart of Israel. The very trade that enriched the kingdom also made it vulnerable, its fortunes tied to the whims of distant rulers and the shifting tides of commerce. The people reveled in their prosperity, but some wondered, at what cost? The throne's brilliance masked the cracks forming in the foundation, as the weight of maintaining such grandeur began to strain the kingdom's resources. The legends of Solomon's wisdom and wealth spread far and wide, but so did the rumors of his excesses. His harem, said to number in the hundreds, became a symbol of both his power and his potential downfall. The kingdom's treasury overflowed, yet the demands of maintaining such a lavish court grew ever heavier. The laborers who built the temple and the palaces whispered of their toil, their voices drowned out by the clamor of celebration. Was Solomon's reign a golden age, or was it a gilded cage, trapping Israel in a cycle of unsustainable grandeur? The answer, like the king himself, seemed shrouded in mystery. As the sun set on Solomon's reign, the question lingered: what would become of Israel once its golden king was gone? The kingdom stood at a crossroads, its future uncertain. The wealth and power that had defined it were undeniable, but so were the challenges that lay ahead. Would the next generation uphold Solomon's legacy, or would the kingdom fracture under the weight of its own ambitions? The throne, once a symbol of unity, now seemed a harbinger of division. And so, the story of Israel under Solomon ended not with a conclusion, but with a question, one that would echo through the ages. The story of Solomon, once the wisest king of Israel, is a tragic tale of spiritual decline despite divine favor. Blessed with unparalleled wisdom and prosperity, Solomon's reign began with a heart devoted to God as he built the magnificent temple in Jerusalem. Yet, as his power grew, so did his weaknesses. His many foreign marriages, intended to secure political alliances, became the very noose that strangled his faithfulness. These unions, forbidden by divine law, introduced him to the seductive allure of pagan worship. Slowly, the king who once knelt before the Lord found himself bowing to foreign gods, his heart divided and his devotion fractured. How could a man so wise fall so far? The answer lies in the subtle erosion of his spiritual foundation, one compromise at a time. Solomon's descent into idolatry was not sudden, but a gradual unraveling. Each foreign wife brought with her the customs and deities of her homeland, and Solomon, eager to please, indulged them. What began as tolerance soon became participation. He built altars to Chemosh, Molech, and Asherah, gods of Moab, Ammon, and Sidon, respectively. These acts were not mere political gestures. They were betrayals of the covenant between Israel and Yahweh. The altars stood as silent witnesses to Solomon's spiritual adultery, their flames consuming the remnants of his once unshakable faith. How could the builder of God's temple also erect monuments to false gods? The contradiction is as haunting as it is revealing. The divine warnings Solomon ignored were not whispers, but thunderous proclamations. God had explicitly commanded the Israelites to avoid intermarriage with foreign nations, knowing it would lead their hearts astray. Yet Solomon, in his arrogance, or perhaps his naivety, believed himself immune to such pitfalls. His wisdom, ironically, became his downfall as he rationalized his actions under the guise of diplomacy and peace. But peace with men came at the cost of war with God. The Lord's anger burned against Solomon, and the consequences of his idolatry would ripple through generations. Why did Solomon, who knew the stakes, choose such a perilous path? The answer may lie in the seductive power of pride. Solomon's story is a cautionary tale of how even the greatest can falter when they lose sight of their spiritual anchor. His marriages were not just unions of flesh but of faith, or rather, the abandonment of it. The pagan altars he built were not mere stone and wood, but symbols of a heart turned cold to the God who had blessed him so richly. The tragedy is not just in his fall, but in the legacy he left behind. A kingdom divided, a people led astray, and a name once synonymous with wisdom now tarnished by disobedience. Could Solomon have turned back? The scriptures are silent on whether he ever repented, leaving us to wonder about the final state of his soul. The echoes of Solomon's spiritual decline resonate through the ages, a stark reminder of the dangers of compromise. His life forces us to ask, how do we guard our hearts against the slow creep of idolatry? Is it wealth, power, or love that threatens to pull us away from our devotion? Solomon's altars still stand in the annals of history, not as monuments to his glory, but as tombstones of his faithfulness. And yet, his story is not without hope. For if even the wisest king could stumble, then surely there is grace for the rest of us. But will we heed the warnings he ignored, or will we repeat his mistakes? The prophecy of divine judgment against Solomon was a thunderous declaration from the heavens, a warning that echoed through the corridors of time. Solomon, once the wisest and most revered king of Israel, had strayed from the path of righteousness, allowing idolatry to creep into the heart of his kingdom. His unfaithfulness was not just a personal failing, it was a betrayal of the covenant between God and Israel. The weight of his sins cast a shadow over the land, and the divine wrath that followed was as inevitable as the rising sun. The prophecy foretold that his kingdom, once united under his father David, would be torn asunder, a punishment for his disobedience. The very fabric of Israel's unity would unravel, leaving behind a legacy of division and strife. The moment the prophecy was uttered, it was as though the earth itself trembled beneath the feet of the Israelites. The people, who had once looked to Solomon as a beacon of divine wisdom, now saw the cracks in his reign. The golden age of Israel, built on the promises of God, was slipping away. The prophecy was not merely a prediction, it was a divine decree, a sentence passed by the Almighty. The kingdom would be divided, not by external enemies, but by the consequences of Solomon's choices. The northern tribes would rise against the house of David, and the once glorious nation would fracture into two warring factions. The question lingered in the air. Could anything be done to avert this impending doom? As the years passed, the prophecy loomed larger, its shadow stretching across the land. Solomon, in his later years, seemed haunted by the knowledge of what was to come. His attempts to reconcile with God were half-hearted, his repentance incomplete. The people, sensing the impending storm, grew restless. The northern tribes, long resentful of the heavy yoke of taxation and labor imposed by Solomon, saw the prophecy as a sign of liberation. The seeds of rebellion were sown, watered by the divine judgment. The kingdom, once a symbol of unity and strength, was now a ticking time bomb. Would the people heed the warning, or would they march blindly into the chaos foretold? The division of Israel was not just a political event, it was a spiritual catastrophe. The prophecy of divine judgment was a mirror held up to the nation, reflecting its moral decay. The people had forgotten the lessons of their ancestors, the covenant that bound them to God. The idols Solomon had allowed into the land were not just statues, they were symbols of a deeper betrayal. The division of the kingdom was the inevitable result of a people who had turned their backs on their Creator. The northern tribes, led by Jeroboam, would establish their own kingdom, while the southern tribes remained loyal to the house of David. But even this loyalty would be tested, for the sins of the father would cast a long shadow over the sons. The fall of Solomon's united kingdom was a cautionary tale, a story of how quickly glory can turn to ruin. The prophecy of divine judgment was fulfilled in the years that followed, as Israel split into two rival kingdoms, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. The division was not just geographical, it was spiritual, a rift that would never fully heal. The northern kingdom would eventually fall to the Assyrians, while Judah would face its own trials. The legacy of Solomon's unfaithfulness was a nation divided, a people scattered. And yet, in the midst of this tragedy, there remained a glimmer of hope. For even in judgment, God's mercy was not entirely absent. The question remained, would the people ever learn from their mistakes, or were they doomed to repeat them? In the twilight of his reign, King Solomon, once the wisest and wealthiest of all rulers, found himself ensnared in a web of existential despair. The grandeur of his palaces, the opulence of his treasures, and the vastness of his knowledge suddenly seemed hollow, like echoes in an empty chamber. Ecclesiastes, his final testament, became a haunting elegy to the futility of human endeavor. "Vanity of vanities," he wrote, "all is vanity." These words, dripping with the weight of regret, revealed a man who had tasted every pleasure, pursued every ambition, and yet found nothing but ashes in his hands. The irony was cruel. Solomon, who had once asked God for wisdom above all else, now saw wisdom itself as a chasing after the wind. The book of Ecclesiastes is a mirror held up to the human soul, reflecting the emptiness of a life lived without divine purpose. Solomon's lamentations are not merely the musings of an aging king, but a universal cry. He had built cities, amassed wealth, and indulged in every conceivable pleasure, yet none of it could fill the void within. "I denied myself nothing my eyes desired," he confessed, "but it was all meaningless." His words cut deep, exposing the lie that material success or intellectual achievement can bring lasting fulfillment. Even wisdom, which he once prized, became a burden, a relentless reminder of life's fleeting nature. Solomon's realization came too late, a tragic epiphany in the shadow of death. He had spent his life chasing after shadows, only to discover that the substance had always eluded him. "There is nothing new under the sun," he declared, a phrase that resonates with the weary cynicism of a man who has seen it all. His pursuits, once glittering with promise, now lay in ruins, like the remnants of a forgotten empire. The question lingers: if Solomon, with all his wisdom and wealth, could not find meaning, what hope is there for the rest of us? His story is a cautionary tale, a warning against the seductive allure of earthly treasures. Yet, buried within Solomon's despair is a glimmer of redemption. In the final verses of Ecclesiastes, he offers a fleeting but profound insight. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. It is as if, in his darkest hour, he glimpsed the truth that had eluded him for so long. The pursuit of pleasure, power, and knowledge had led him astray, but the simplicity of faith pointed the way home. His journey, though marked by regret, ends with a whisper of hope, a reminder that meaning is not found in the things of this world, but in the one who created it. Solomon's story leaves us with an unsettling question. How much of our own lives are spent chasing after the wind? Are we, like him, building monuments to our own vanity, only to realize too late their emptiness? His words are a mirror, forcing us to confront the fragility of our ambitions. Yet, they are also a beacon, guiding us toward the only source of true fulfillment. The final reflections of Ecclesiastes are not just the lament of a dying king, but a timeless invitation to seek first the kingdom of God, where meaning is never lost and purpose is never in vain. The tale of Solomon, the wisest king to ever rule, is a profound lesson etched into the annals of history. His reign began with divine favor, a humble request for wisdom that pleased God and set him apart from all others. Yet, as his power and wealth grew, so did the shadows of pride and distraction. The very gifts that were meant to serve his people became snares, luring him away from the simplicity of obedience. Solomon's story is not just a chronicle of a king's rise and fall. It is a mirror reflecting the fragility of human resolve when faced with the allure of worldly treasures. How often do we, like Solomon, trade the eternal for the fleeting, mistaking abundance for fulfillment? Solomon's wisdom was unparalleled, a beacon that drew nations to his court. His proverbs and songs still echo through time, offering guidance and insight. But wisdom, when divorced from reverence, becomes a hollow shell. The king who once penned, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom," found himself entangled in the very folly he warned against. His marriages to foreign women, his alliances with idolatrous nations, each step a calculated compromise, each decision adrift from the divine. The irony is stark. The man who knew the path of righteousness chose the detour of desire. What does this say about the human heart's capacity for self-deception? The turning point in Solomon's story is not marked by a single catastrophic event, but by a slow, insidious erosion of devotion. His heart, once wholly dedicated to God, became divided, pulled in countless directions by the demands of his kingdom and the whispers of his many wives. The temples he built for foreign gods stood as monuments to his spiritual decline, a betrayal of the covenant that had once defined his reign. The lesson here is chilling. Even the greatest among us are not immune to the corrosion of compromise. How do we guard our hearts against such gradual decay? Yet, Solomon's story does not end in despair. In his later years, the weight of his choices bore down upon him, and he penned the book of Ecclesiastes, a raw, unfiltered reflection on the emptiness of life without God. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity, he declared, a stark admission of the futility of chasing after the wind. This final act of honesty is perhaps his greatest legacy, a testament to the redemptive power of repentance. Even in his brokenness, Solomon points us back to the truth. Fulfillment is found not in the abundance of possessions, but in the simplicity of fearing God. What would it take for us to learn this lesson without the pain of his mistakes? The eternal lesson of Solomon's life is a warning and a beacon. It warns us of the dangers of pride, the seduction of worldly distractions, and the peril of divided loyalties. But it also shines as a beacon of hope, reminding us that no fall is too great for God's grace. Solomon's story is not just about the consequences of disobedience. It is about the relentless pursuit of a God who waits for the prodigal to return. As we navigate our own lives, teetering between wisdom and folly, May we heed the echoes of Solomon's journey. Will we choose the fleeting or the eternal? The answer lies in the fear of the Lord, the beginning and the end of all true wisdom. And so, the story of Solomon lingers, a tale of light and shadow, triumph and tragedy, wisdom and folly woven into the fabric of history. At X Mystery, we believe this is not merely the biography of a king from long ago, but a mirror held up to each of us. It asks questions that cut deeper than gold and power. What do we truly desire? What are we willing to trade for it? And when we reach the summit of our ambitions, will we still recognize ourselves? Or will we, like Solomon, find that all we've grasped turns to dust in our hands? Here at X Mystery, we see Solomon not only as a warning, but also as a beacon. His rise shows us how high a heart aligned with the divine can soar. His fall shows us how subtle and how deadly compromise can become when it creeps in unnoticed. And his final words in Ecclesiastes remind us that redemption is never too late, that wisdom begins and ends in awe of the eternal. The mystery of Solomon is the mystery of humanity. Why we keep chasing what cannot satisfy, why we keep building temples only to tear them down with our own hands. But also why, even at our lowest, grace waits for us to return. At X Mystery, we invite you to look beyond the surface of history and see yourself in its echoes. What will you choose, the fleeting or the eternal? The weight of regret or the peace of surrender? The story of Solomon does not just belong to the past. It is alive wherever hearts are torn between wisdom and desire. Perhaps the greatest mystery of all is not that Solomon fell, but that even after all his mistakes, his voice still calls to us across the centuries. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Will we listen? That, dear viewer, is a choice only you can make. Here at X Mystery, we leave you with this question: what temple are you building? And what will you worship there?
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you love mysterious stories and want to join us on this exciting journey of inspiration, click the subscribe button for X Mystery and turn on notifications so you won't miss any content.